done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent, you won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Hello and welcome back to the Belfast Bapcast. Tonight we have a returning guest, none other than Guy Anderson, prolific researcher and one of those individuals that just turns history upside down. So welcome, Guy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. How are you doing?
Yes, can't complain. Well, no, I do complain quite a lot if you ask my wife, but there's nothing really to complain about, so all is good. How's things with yourself been since last time you were on? I've seen you've been doing quite a few podcasts in the interim, so.
Yeah, it comes in fits and starts. Some days I can do 3, then I can go a few days without doing any. But I've got another 2 this afternoon, actually, so it's a busy
Yeah,
day.
it's 3 today as well. It's and then none for the rest of the week. So it's balance is good.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
last time you were on, we kind of meandered and we sort of just chatted about everything and didn't go into anything in depth as such. So I would just like to get the best out of you really this time because you are such a wealth of knowledge. So the reason you're here is simple. So uh, you went back to the old books most people comment on but never actually have read. And when you started digging into primary sources, what was the first crack you found in the official history timeline?
Well, with the timeline, that would be Anatoly Fomenko. So one of his books is called New Chronology, and it's quite intense. But the gist of it is that he believed, along with 2 other Russian professors and scientists, they tend to be actually more mathematicians than anything else.
Yeah, he
That
was.
the Jesuits actually went out there to completely remove the history of the Tartarian Empire, and this was targeting Russia more than anywhere else because they wanted to take the technology for their own purposes and then actually make Russia appear to be almost backward compared to Western civilization. So they removed the history of Tartaria and then basically added 800 years to the timeline and showed this very slow evolution of technology as
So
opposed
by
to
seeing, sorry,
sorry.
just by seeing the old texts, and then obviously there was a replacement of supposed knowledge. Did you see like the crossover?
Well, what they did was they actually bought and stole when needed the history and information from people within the Tartarian Empire, specifically Russia, that had um, technical details and blueprints, if you like, on how to harness energy from the ether and how to build a structure that will do that and then resonate at 432 hertz using cymatics and working with frequency. That was taken and then handed to the Rothschilds on a silver platter. So they bolted on 800 years. So it looked like there's this sort of slow evolution where we get to the point where we are now, where actually we were more advanced before. What we think now is technological advancement with regard to smartphones and so on, and the fact we're able to do this right now is nothing in comparison to how they lived before. Just a completely different ethos
Well, if anything,
regarding
it's
technology.
unlike the Tartarians. It's not in harmony with us. It's not in harmony with our body. Like the radioactive signals and stuff that's sent out can make us sick, like 5G, etc., and different neurological diseases it can cause. So if it was Tartarian, they would have had a probably a harmonious solution to what we're doing right now that wouldn't be causing electromagnetic frequencies and different things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're bombarded, aren't we? It's not just what's around us, whether it's a smart meter, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, but also when we go outside, the air we breathe. We look up and see chemtrails, but the water's got toxins in it like fluoride. It's in our food supply. That they hit us from every single direction, and then we put the TV on and we're bombarded subliminally through programs like MK Ultra. And in addition to that, we have the odd medical intervention that comes along where we're asked to take a trial vaccine and hope for the best. And the knock-on effect from that has been absolutely horrific. I mean, it sort of makes thalidomide look like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just getting back to the old books, can you name some of the old books that you? I know you've sourced them out and you have quite a lot of them. So what would you say are some of the crucial ones for
Well, it don't.
research?
I'll name the ones that I've got, but for anybody who wants to look into this, they need to get encyclopedias that were printed before 1800. They're a good place to start because they'll not only show you the Tartarian flags and crests, but they'll show you the maps, and they'll also show you population figures and who those people were with regard to, ethnicity
Culture.
and faith. Yeah, lots of different religions, because Genghis Khan allowed the practice of any religion without fear of persecution throughout the Tartarian Empire. So there are a few funky ones out there. But the first book that I read that had really solid information in was actually Marco Polo's Travels. Now that's quite it's tiny little book, but you can get it online. I've got the first edition, but you can grab a copy of that online, and that tells you all about his time spent with the Khans, and also he describes the buildings and the magnificence of the buildings and how they were working with sound. So there in black and white, written by Marco Polo, is quite a bit of evidence. From that, I started reading other books. Peter Fleming, wrote a book. It's Ian Fleming's brother who wrote the James Bond novels. He wrote one called News from Tartary, all about his time there when he went. He was sent out there to see what was still operational and what remained of the empire, and wrote a book about that. Again, I've got the first edition, but you can get copies of that online as well.
In regards to Genghis Khan, do you feel that he has been presented to us as a barbarian for purposes of not looking towards that region for any form of antiquity or any form of innovation?
Yeah, and they do this all the time. The victors do really write the history, and they invert people. So somebody like Genghis Khan would be perceived as being a warmonger and doing all sorts of nefarious things, and then that's that part of history sort of dealt with. They tick a box and move on. But actually, if you look into his history, he was the first person to introduce a passport system, not to manage and control people's movements, but actually something that assured safe passage for Europeans wishing to travel into Tartaria. And they kept this passport on them, and it basically said that they were allowed to travel without being hindered. No hindrance, no ridicule regarding their beliefs, and they were answerable to Genghis Khan if they were stopped or inhibited in any way. He was the first person to do that. He then allowed the practice of any religion at all within the empire without persecution. Now, this doesn't sound like someone who goes around raping and pillaging. And Marco Polo said that the man was not anything. Well, he described him as being spiritual, well read, very intelligent, and actually quite calm and placid. And there's no mention of war or anything to do with a savage side to him in Marco Polo's books at all.
Yeah, they wouldn't have possibly lied to this guy, would they?
I think they do that quite a bit. Yeah, I think they've been doing that for a very long time. Yeah.
There is certainly a pattern emerging. Yeah.
Yeah. They did it in the Second World War. I mean, people now, I used to be a tattoo artist, and there are a number of people out there that have tattoos of Winston Churchill with Union Jacks, and they're proud of this and proud of that. But if you actually look at what he did in places like Dresden, for example, the man was a war criminal. He was a warmonger.
David Irving's
books
are fantastic for Churchill's information.
Mm.
He goes
Yeah,
deep into his financial ties, and
Yeah. There are quite a few people out there that have written about him, but he's perhaps the best known. So yeah, I think they invert people all the time. You know, that the victors do write history, and anybody that isn't on their side or part, really, ultimately, under the British Empire's umbrella, which is still up and running and operational today, then they're considered to be, savage or lesser.
yeah, I feel that very much is the case. And it was very more prevalent if you look back in old films. You know, whenever they were like actually having white actors play black actors, and like the stereotypes were preposterous. You know,
Yeah.
um, like just had them pretty much next to animals. And just to segue back then to Anatoly Fomenko, so obviously he was ridiculed a lot for his work, which I personally believe was Jesuitic, like any sort of suppression of proper knowledge is. But could you just explain a bit more about his work off? I know he was a mathematician, and how he came to discover that there was a chunk missing. And
Yeah, well, he was actually a professor of mathematics, and and he'd been studying the Mongolian and Tartar history for some time as almost as a hobby. I mean, he's still around today, um, so he's still out there. It'd be interesting to see if anybody could actually get hold of him and get him to come on a show, because you know he's the one that really exposed what had been going on, and he was coming from it from a mathematical perspective, because he was looking at sacred geometry and how mathematics were used to build these structures. And he found holes where he would take, for example, really magnificent, what we would call Greco-Roman building in St. Petersburg, and then look at the narrative behind it with regard to who the architect was, for example, and then finding that the architect hadn't built anything like that before, had no knowledge of how to work using cymatics and frequency, and none of it made any sense. So he dug more and more and more. But he's one of three people, all Russian, that actually put this information out there. But he happens to have been more focused upon the timeline. And what he realized was that if you look at how we evolved technologically, we go from almost nothing in the 1800s to the Industrial Revolution. And then 5 minutes later, we've got moon landings. It all happens relatively quickly within 100 years or so. Everything happens. But before that, there's absolutely nothing going on at all for hundreds of years. And that doesn't make sense, because that's not how humans evolve. So that's what he looked into. Um,
no,
and it was basically, yeah. So what he discovered or uncovered was that the Jesuits were behind this, and this came about because the Vatican, the Catholic Church, if you like, was bust. It had run out of money. It had no money left, so they needed an injection of cash. The Rothschilds bailed them out in exchange for the Jesuit order being sent out there as missionaries to infiltrate everywhere in the Tartarian Empire, focusing heavily on Russia, to uncover whatever information they could, blueprints, as I said earlier on, if you like.
yeah,
This information was bought and in some cases stolen, and then used by the Rothschilds to be slowly released once they'd cracked how to do it, and put back into the society, really, at a time
monetizable.
in
Yeah.
which it was ready to be profited from. And that's what they did. And of course, then you got people like Nikola Tesla popping up, who looked into the work of people like Anatoly Fomenko and started trying to figure out himself how he could reverse engineer Antiquitech, as it's called.
And who got his papers whenever he died? John Trump.
Yeah, Donald's uncle. Yeah, he took
Yeah,
them. But apparently, the story goes with that John G. Trump and a locksmith, or a famous lock picker, actually, went into the hotel room and picked the lock on his safe. and that there were 2 van loads of files and documents removed from his hotel room, the Hotel New Yorker. But the strange thing is, Tesla said that he never wrote anything down because every experiment came to him in a vision. And when he actually conducted it, it worked exactly as it had been predicted to him. So I don't understand what he was writing down. But the files went off to a secure location in New York, a warehouse. And it took 2 of them to take all of the documents from the hotel room. The only files that were never handed over, and people allege that John G. Trump kept them, were to do with time travel. But after a couple of months, apparently Tesla's nephew went to retrieve the files from this warehouse, and they handed them over to him. But I can't find any evidence of Tesla having a nephew. So, the plot thickens really with that.
Yeah, a lot of mystery surrounds Tesla in general. Not, I would even question the authenticity of Tesla as well. Was he this? Because Albert Einstein certainly wasn't the genius he was portrayed to be. He was a prolific plagiarist, and provably so. So another person that has been quite handily presented to us through the alternative media, but the popular mainstream alternative media is Tesla. So I'd really wonder what the narrative would be behind that. Is it the control, the release of the antiquity, or tie it all back to this one genius and hide that entire society? Or
Yeah, well, it's a bit too convenient, isn't it? And like you said, it's like Albert Einstein. His wife worked at the patent office and was sharing information with him, and he was putting it out there as being his own, when actually it looks like it was taken by his wife from the patent office. And he married his cousin, and never reproduced. There are no children. He didn't have sex, allegedly. Neither did Nikola Tesla. And you've always got this weird story with people like that. And it's interesting. It's like Napoleon and other famous figures throughout history. They never have any children. There are no children. So you can't actually go up to them and say, have you still got great granddad's paperwork? Or have you got any information from great
are they
granddad?
homunculus?
You think?
Serious question. Have they been bred for that purpose and unable to reproduce? It's it is a possibility.
I
Certainly,
don't
given
know.
the history of what looks like cloning in the past and stuff. I mean, even the Genesis, if you read it in a certain way, looks like DNA manipulation. So I mean, it's been going on for a long time. What level has it
Yeah,
progressed to?
yeah. I mean, well, if you look at Genesis, they even describe Adam being put to sleep when they remove the rib. So it's clearly a medical procedure taking place where they remove a rib and make another life from it. But that story is taken from earlier Sumerian text, which is
Christians do
over
the Bible
4,000
such a
years old.
disservice.
Sorry.
Christians do the Bible such a disservice because it's such a fantastic book, but they box it off within this literal framework, which allows no room for interpretation, and it's ridiculous because it's clearly a book of allegories, and
Mm.
if you're going to read it literally, you're going to end up in a very strange place. It's
Yeah, absolutely. And I say to anybody that's, because I get people all the time that are heavily religious, God-fearing people, say
well,
to
I'm
me
God
that
fearing, but
they'll say to me that you've got to take Jesus into your life, and you mentioned the Anunnaki, it's blasphemous and blah blah blah. And I say the same thing. If you really do believe everything that's written in the Old Testament, if that is your go-to, then you need to read the Sumerian text. Now, which is over 4,000 years old. And then you'll see the same story, the story of beings superior to us, creating us in their image, the story of the flood. It's all there. and dated, carbon dated as being
It shows a lack of
thousands of years
faith,
older.
really, doesn't it?
Sorry.
If you're unable to like take any form of questioning on your belief, it shows a very fragile basis that it's set on. Because I mean, I would consider myself God fearing, but that doesn't mean I can't, look at other subjects and, like you say, Sumerian tablets, for example. But then you also follow it up with carbon dated, and I would have issues with carbon 14 dating and the actual validity of it, because the old Jesuits again have tinkered with the carbon. They control like the timeline of it, so it's it's all very. You can't really get a reading on anything, and that's why I think.
Yeah, the problem with carbon dating is, although we can tell that something is a lot older than something else, what we can't do is actually categorically state exactly how old something is because of the starting point. So if the first item that's dated is given a false date, then everything else from that point is wrong.
Yeah,
All we know is that the Sumerian texts are the oldest text that we have that tell that story. But whether or not they are over 4,000 years old or 40,000 years old is something that perhaps we might never know. Um, we just know it's the oldest that we have to hand that tells that same story.
it is funny that you were saying that you get quite almost attacked by Christians in the comment section. I've seen you say on quite a few podcasts, etc. I mean, once again, if your faith is correct, why do you feel the need to be visceral? And what sort of example is that setting for your faith? If that's the output that you're giving to someone who isn't of the same belief, it's not really imploring anybody to explore your side of things, or
No, I had this conversation. I was on this radio show last night in America, and I said to the lady that was presenting it that it's funny, I followed religion for years. I went to church. I was brought up to go to church every Sunday. I went to a Church of England school. My father actually is Roman Catholic. My mum's Jewish. My wife's Muslim. So I've got a mixed bag around me. And the more I looked into religion, the more I started to believe that actually what I had in front of me was the truth. But actually, when I went down the rabbit hole and I've dug further and further and started looking at other cultures, I I realised that the same story repeats everywhere, and that the story of Jesus is very similar to the story of Horus. And there are lots of cultures that have similar beliefs from different times with different names. And and ultimately, there are over 4,200 officially recognized religions, and they all share one thing in common. They believe that their story is the truth and the others aren't. um, and the funny thing with it all is that they profess often to share a story of love, loving thy neighbor, being charitable and compassionate. But when you see some of the venom that is spouted from people that claim to be religious and doing God's work and following God's work, I ask myself the question that if they truly believe that God is watching over us at all times,
why are you
then
getting
God
on with
just
it?
saw what they wrote. God heard what they said. God saw what they wrote. And I wouldn't think anybody out there that's godlike, or a being that's of a higher level of consciousness to us would appreciate their name and their message being shared by someone who does it in an aggressive, ridiculing, or
Correct.
frankly,
Like
you know,
Stephen Anderson, have you seen that?
unpleasant
Creative
way.
Mind?
It's very strange, isn't it? If the message is love and charity, as I said, and it does make you wonder why someone would take that message, spin it into something unpleasant, and then attack someone with it.
I
And
think that's more.
millions of people have died for this.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think it's a
sorry,
nicer
Mark.
expression of what's inside them, though. It's not, if somebody's that venomous with trying to get God's love inside you, it's, it's a it's a reflection of what's in them. Because certainly
Mm.
the teaching of the Bible is not like Jesus' teachings was not anger. The only time the man
No.
lost his temper was when they were trading in the temples and he flipped the tables. he taught love, he taught unity, he taught to love thy neighbor. I mean, what's difficult about that? And
Yeah, and also, there are references to him walking away. He would say what he had to say. If people didn't want to hear it, he would walk away. What he didn't do is pin them down to the floor and rub their nose in it or force them to hear.
yeah,
He understood that, the message isn't for everyone. Some people will find religion along the way. And I also think it's a very personal thing, and that it's something that you shouldn't force upon other people. You should
no,
keep it within you. And everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. But I don't think if Jesus was walking amongst us today, that he'd be very grateful for some of the people that claim to follow him in the way they go about doing it and the things that they say to other people that don't share
no.
their views.
I
I
think
don't think
Jesus
it'd
would
be.
have taught his message similar to yourself or any of the other guests I have on the show. Like you, you tell your message with no emotion, and you go home and you have your dinner.
Yeah,
You're not here to save people. You're here to witness. You know,
yeah,
it's uh, it's not your duty to bring people to the light, but it's your duty if you have the knowledge to spread it. Yes, but your responsibility is done at that point.
yeah. I agree. I think ultimately we're only responsible for ourselves, not other people, and it's not our job to force other people to accept our views or even push our thoughts and views onto them. I
You
put my
see,
information out there for people who want to listen to it.
in the old text that you have read about, like Tartarian uh, civilization and the different religions, can you give us a overview of some of the religions?
Yeah, I mean, one of perhaps my most interesting one of all, is the Breatharians. I don't know if you're aware of those.
No.
Well, obviously they had your traditional religions in there. They had Muslims and and so on. But the Breatharians were the most interesting of all, and that is the belief that everything that you need to sustain life can be harnessed through the sun. In the same way a plant grows or a tree grows, a giant oak tree that's living off nothing but nutrients it's receiving through the soil, a bit of rain and sunlight. And they allegedly didn't eat. They never ate at all. They drank water sparingly, but they actually sustained life through sunlight, which was absorbed through their skin. And the darker your skin is, the easier it is to actually achieve that.
There is people doing that
Yeah, pardon.
still. I'm pretty sure there is
Yeah,
still people who are doing that to this day.
yeah, and oddly enough, my brother who lives out in Tenerife, he was seeing this girl for a little while from Russia, and she does do it. She goes a month at a time without eating. She still practices it. Um,
Convenient region to
so,
come from to know that practice, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
A very convenient region for her to come from to
Yeah,
know that practice.
yeah. I desperately wanted to talk to her, but they split up, and now they're not talking. They've blocked each other. But I really wanted to talk to her.
In regards to Russia, like I still believe they hold quite a lot of the knowledge. In regards to Tartaria, and do so probably for a military strategic standpoint, because I did see headlines. It was a year back previously about Putin was going to do a big release on Tartarian knowledge.
Mm, yeah.
Um, be intrigued to see what they have.
Well, he actually, I think it was in 2012, he actually presented a map to the leader of Kazakhstan, who, um, who has descendants going all the way back through Tartaria, very long ancestral line. And Putin presented him a map, a correct map of Russia, showing it as the Tartarian Empire, and that went viral. And people are still sharing that now. I still see that from time to time on Facebook. People sharing actually the video footage of him doing that. Um, so it makes you wonder though with him, because a lot of people say he's actually on the same side. It's just his turn to play the baddie. Some people say he's been
Mm,
replaced. he looks slightly different to the earlier Putin.
At
I
times, you
don't
almost
know.
think he's on the side of truth. Sometimes he plays that narrative too,
Yeah.
that he's almost on the side of truth, and like he has made a lot of moves to actually protect the Christian sort of ethos of the West, whereas the West has happily degraded it through like what Yuri Brezhnev talked about, through the social degradation of of the nation, and we're now living in the ends of it. The death throes of the empire.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, isn't it? Because sometimes I wonder if they're just playing a game. Like I said a moment ago, is it just is he just the bad cop and you're the good cop? Is that just how it is? Are they all part of the same club?
I think
Um,
that is the case. Yeah,
it's difficult, isn't it? Because it looks like that. Once you start digging into this stuff, it does look like that. But there is part of me that thinks that actually he's a good guy and he's trying to get information out there that he knows is going to upset the apple cart, and truth that he believes perhaps shouldn't be,
yeah. I
suppressed.
think so. Any hope of there being like a maverick world leader who would step out, and that went away in 2020 because none of them stood up really, and any of them that did, they were put out very quickly. I think it was the leader of Tanzania, the Brazilian president,
Oh, yeah. Have you heard
and a
about what's
couple
been
more
going on there?
in Tanzania or Brazil.
Yeah, just literally in Tanzania, just literally right now. It's just been happening.
No,
There's a huge, huge slaughter, huge genocide taking place. Someone from Tanzania sent me the details because that's where my wife's from. They thought I might be interested. Thousands of people are being killed out there right now.
right.
There's a bit of an
Of an
uprising,
ethnic
and it's
race, or
it.
is it
Sorry,
civil war? Is it like an ethnic
like,
thing or civil war or?
difficult to tell. It's people that are that aren't playing ball with basically the government. I've got the information. I can give you a few bits and pieces on it. I
Yeah,
haven't
go
taken
ahead.
it all in yet. Um, Now this is someone who follows my channel and kindly sent this information over to me. 10,000 so far have been killed, and this yeah.
Wow,
Right. Now, this person has sent the information to all governments, all media, every church, saying that 10,000 people have now been killed. This was yesterday. He sent this.
yeah,
Um, Tanzanian Independence Day is on December the 9th, and a countrywide demonstration is planned. And he believes it will be another excuse for a mass slaughter. The presidential elections took place on the 29th of October, and he flew out there the day before for a family funeral. He expected to see protests out there because of what had been going on, but what he didn't expect to see was gunfire, um, live rounds being fired into groups of people. They turned the internet off countrywide for 6 days.
wow,
Um, and oddly enough, he said that his son was in Ireland, and he said that he had just found out that there had been 3,000 people killed so far. Um, Ugandan and Zanzibarian mercenaries were drafted in, provided with military grade weapons, using expanded bullets to attack the public that were demonstrating. People being murdered in the streets, female doctors gunned down that have tried to assist. And this all took place around Dar es Salaam, which is actually where my wife was born.
that's
Um,
fingerprints for the CIA all over it, doesn't it?
Sorry.
That sounds like CIA military coup sort of activity all over
Does,
it.
doesn't
That
it? Sounds exactly
yeah,
like that. Apparently, there's some information on X. People have been talking about it on X, calling it the Tanzania massacre.
that's horrific. ten
Excuse me,
thousand,
but
and
it's been
what's the
silenced
time
everywhere.
frame? Do you know?
He doesn't say. All we've got is a body count of 10,000, two army lorries full of dead bodies.
Wow,
Um, yeah, yeah. So that's been happening right now. People being beaten with batons, tear gas being used. Yeah, and an estimate of 10,000 people dead so far. And this is through demonstrations, people that are just demonstrating against the public. Sorry, the public demonstrating against the state.
And they're being
So
slaughtered.
yeah, all connected to the presidential elections that took place on the 29th. Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
so there
And
you go.
you
So
know,
protests have broken out during
and
the elections.
here's the problem. It's not going to be trendy to talk about that. It's not going
No,
to be trendy to go down with a Tanzanian flag and stand outside the city hall and be free Tanzania.
no.
So that'll get about 5 minutes of our time and fuck off, unfortunately. And that's a real sad
Mm.
thing, because what that says to me is one human life is worth more than another, which it's not. You know, the tragedy
No,
in Tanzania is every bit as tragic as what's going on in West Bank, what's going on in any murder anywhere. It's
and I think the
horrendous.
fact that no one knows about this is more frightening. I mean, we're all aware of what's going on in Israel and Palestine, on the Gaza Strip and so on. We're all full aware of that.
Do you have a bit
But
more of a
like,
political breakdown on Tanzania, so I can turn this into just one segment, just so we can get it out there a bit?
do I have some more?
Yeah, just
I
like a
can
bit of a
read you the
political
entire.
breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read you what he sent me. I'll read the whole thing. Um, right. So he said to me, Guy, I will give you chapter and verse from my own literal experience. Tanzania held presidential elections on the 29th of October. I flew in the day before for a family funeral. The opposition were all barred or arrested and disappeared, so only Samia Suluhu Hassan, the incumbent ruler, I think that is, of the Chama Cha Mapinduzi CCM, was standing. I expected protests, but what unfolded was an horrific nightmare. On election day, protests did indeed break out, and I'm sure that agent provocateurs were involved. Police dealt with them utilising non-lethal batons and tear gas. I could hear this from where I was staying. A few hours later, I noticed the gunfire changing to live rounds. I've heard this multiple times before, so recognised it immediately. My wife said that they were killing protesters. That evening, the internet was switched off countrywide and stayed switched off for 6 days. So I was blind, but able to message my son in Ireland, who told me that he had heard reports of at least 3,000 dead so far. The mass killings have actually been taking place in people's homes as well. I can detail hundreds of accounts. Um, and it's very clear that it was Ugandan and Zanzibarian mercenaries, and this has been confirmed, that were drafted in, provided with military grade weapons, and were using expanding bullets, thereby reducing ricochets, but maximizing the kill rate.
That's
My other son,
horrendous.
who's a recently qualified doctor, sorry,
I just said that's horrendous.
he
Sorry.
was working in the city. Yeah, he was working in the city hospital when he heard doctors were finishing off the wounded. I ordered him not to go back, and he's flown back to Ireland yesterday, thank God. Accounts include children caught outside breaking curfews or playing pool and told to lie down, and were then murdered. 3 people were murdered on a street, and 2 female doctors went to help. They were gunned down too. My sister-in-law told me yesterday that Dar es Salaam police officers and his son and one of their sons ran out to confront the killers, shouting, "We're the police, why are you doing that?" And they were shot in the head. A girl who works at my wife's house told us that she saw bodies stacked up like logs on street junctions for army trucks to remove. My nephew then told me, who lives near Mount Kilimanjaro, that he saw 2 army lorries go past, one full of bodies, the other one half full. I could go on, but what's clear to me is this operation was planned well in advance and with collusion with global control systems and global media blackout. At the absolute very least, if RTE could raise a little awareness, perhaps the tens of thousands of grieving relatives could get their loved ones' bodies to bury. And then he just says that
I'm just looking online
Tanzania.
here, and the only stories that I can find here is Tanzania may struggle to secure funding due to its battered image. President says that is last updated 1 hour ago on Reuters. So
Yeah,
obviously a media blackout.
yeah, yeah. He said there's no information of it anywhere, but there's if you look for Tanzania massacre on X, then there are tweets about it, but it's hidden from everywhere else. So I'm actually going to put this out there tomorrow on Facebook. I don't have a
I'll
huge
get to it.
following. Sort of 30,000-40,000 people I can reach, but it needs a lot more than that.
Well, what I'll
And
do
we're
is
seeing
I'll
this
clip
sort of,
that section down, and I'll put you in as a collab on YouTube, and then we'll get it shared out as much as possible, because
yeah,
that's
that's
the people need
fantastic.
to know. That's what I'm saying. What's happening? What we're showing is what's going on in the world is the narrative that we're supposed to know about. Why are we not supposed to care about Tanzania? That's clearly a military coup that's went on with
Mm,
outside forces there at play. That's even worse.
absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? I don't know if I told you this before, but my eldest lad, he used to work for a bank in Australia,
Yeah.
and he worked with a lad from Afghanistan. And he asked him, this is only a couple of years ago, he asked him what it was like living in an area surrounded with terrorism, under the control of ISIS or Al Qaeda. And he said there wasn't a problem until the CIA arrived, dressed up as terrorists, telling us they were ISIS and Al Qaeda. We hadn't heard of them until then.
Yeah, yeah, and that show was the same as with the Mujahideen that fought the Russians during the 80s. I mean, that's where Bin Laden was spawned out of. He was originally a, a documented CIA asset during the Mujahideen and the Afghan war, the Afghan and Russia war, sorry. And then obviously they've just repurposed him.
Yeah, yeah. We're given this backstory that the brains behind it all is running the show from a cave.
Yeah,
Come on, and
it's always
they
going
miss
right.
out. They miss out the fact that Bush's dad was involved with the Bin Laden
Through
family. They
the
were
Carlyle
working
group.
in. Sorry.
It was through the Carlyle group. There was the Bushes, the Bin
Yes.
Laden, the Cheneys. Everyone were connected through that Carlyle group. That
Mm,
own things they call them and Barrett folks. Other such companies. It's amazing how many places these tentacles touch.
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just shows you, doesn't it? It's like history is repeating itself. Tartaria fell. The people are killed off through civil wars, genocide, and so on. We had outbreaks, things like cholera, that got rid of a few people. We had people being locked up for not agreeing with the New World Order. And we're back here again.
Yeah,
We had the outbreak in 2020. It looks like there's going to be another one next year. They're tightening the thumb screws on people like you and me, where we have the risk now of being silenced or arrested
bring it on.
for speaking out. Um, and it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? If what is going on out there right now is all part of the Great Reset, because I don't think this is a coincidence. And you've got the religions fighting over each other. Like here, we've had mosques and synagogues entered where people have been attacked, and I think that this is all being controlled by the deep state,
It
because
definitely
Tony
is. It
Blair
definitely
sat behind it all. He's got this one faith, one world faith agenda up his sleeve that he wants to
is.
push.
You see,
I think
in
they,
China,
sorry,
before they brought in the digital ID system, there was a spate of fatal train stabbings went on.
perfect, isn't it?
You
Absolutely
know,
perfect. A perfect. That the big push for digital ID, I think, will be connected to something happening next year, and I think it's going to be an outbreak again. And they'll say, well, it's important that we know who's vaccinated, who isn't, and digital ID will be a big push for that. They're going to use it with immigration as well. They're going to say that we need it for immigration. And my argument is that if the immigrants are exactly who you claim they are, that they come here illegally, they work for cash in hand illegally, they're not going to have digital ID, they're going to carry on doing what they were doing anyway. Digital ID is not going to be a problem for people who aren't in the system. It's a problem
No.
for people that are in the system. And my hope is that those that aren't awake enough to see that this is going to lead to the Chinese social credit scoring system are going to see it as, at the very least, an invasion of their privacy, and that in itself is enough to fight back and resist.
Mm. You would hope, but it seems that it's quite harsh to lamp people off as NPCs, but it does seem like 70% of the population is calcified in the brain area.
Yeah,
Anything beyond what's happening on Emmerdale or stimulus is not in their repertoire.
yeah, I totally agree. And this is something Dolores Cannon said, that she described 80% of the population as having no soul. And I think that it's not that, Mike, personally. I think that it's perhaps that if memory is carried in our DNA, then perhaps the reason some of us are awake and some of us aren't, the majority aren't, is because the majority are relatively new on the scene. If your ancestry goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, then you have the memory within your DNA that's telling you how we live isn't right, what's going on isn't right. What you were taught at school doesn't make any sense. And if you're new on the block and your ancestry only goes back a couple of hundred years, you're not going to know anything different. There's nothing inside you, no inner dialogue telling you. And that's where I think the cloning comes into play. That
Yeah.
they repopulated by cloning. They got blank sheets. They're not going to question anything because they don't know how things are supposed to be.
And out of the whole orphan train industry, etc., actually came the fostering system and the children's homes and the orphanages, and which has pretty much been an industry of pedophilia and feeding
Mm,
that satanic industry for sacrificial purposes, which sounds fantastical, but it's provable in a lot of cases. I mean, even just the Jimmy Savile case, like into how many times he was supposed to have taken kids away from that Hope de la Grande place, in the out of Jersey or whatever it was, and
mm.
just Leon Britton or another politician he was supplying them with, Edward Heath. Sorry, Edward Heath, and he was
Ted
bringing kids on,
Heath, yeah, yeah,
and he
yeah.
was
If he
doing
was
whatever
alive
to the boys,
today, yeah.
throwing them overboard.
The police
And
actually said that if he was still around today, they have enough evidence to charge him. Um, and they got away with it. I mean, and this goes back. It goes back to the beginning of bloody time, doesn't it? Where children are just taken and abused, and Esther Anson was caught up in this. While she's 1 minute she's setting up Childline, and while she's doing that, she's having an affair with someone who was the head of the judicial system in Scotland, Lord Advocate, I think they call them. I can't remember the exact title. Who was allegedly involved with all sorts of sex rings and child abuse. And this is while she's setting up Childline. And some people actually said that perhaps the reason she set Childline up was so they could get hold of children,
oh yeah,
and knew which ones were reporting things and which ones weren't, and then they could deal with them.
allegedly, that's obviously just throw allegedly in there, just
Mm,
for uh, legal purposes. But like, it's you know, you think just the fact that these people are so different. Just like I was playing a clip during interviewing Mark Devlin there of George Carlin and his famous "It's a big club and we're not part of it." That couldn't be more evident now. And it begs the question why more people don't step back from the mainstream and understand that these people do not have our best intentions at heart. They're lying to us at every turn. Like basically, what they tell us, we live. The reality is the inversion of. It's
mm,
you
I
would feel
totally
that
agree.
there would be a lot more mistrust there naturally. That people would see that it's all a big club and we're not part of it. Especially through the revelations of all like the TV presenters of our era being pedos
Mm,
and Even Hugh Edwards recently, and like how much more evidence do you need? Like Jimmy Savile hanging around with King Charles. King Charles is best mates with that other archbishop that was a root as well. Like his
Yeah,
brothers. Yeah, where does it stop? And like, at what point do we stop hero worship and clear child abusers?
I've no idea. And this is why, again, I think that there's something different about the people that are awake and the people that aren't asleep, because that would be enough, wouldn't it, to put anybody off that thinks outside the box just for a moment. You would like to believe that that is enough. And when the BBC started losing presenters through through Operation Newtree to you know accusations of child abuse, you would think that a lot of people would have switched that channel off and perhaps out of protest said, I'm not paying my TV license anymore. But they're still watching it. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to stop supporting institutions that either cover up, which if they're covering up, then they're involved. They're complicit. And I
Everything
think that
a cover up
yeah,
on the logo. So like anybody that's involved in
absolutely.
that mainstream, unless they're like just a radio presenter that's just like talking shite, if they're presenting news to you, they're involved in the presentation of the narrative that you're supposed to be digesting. So they're not your friend. They're not to be trusted. And to be honest,
No,
I personally would
no.
pay no attention to them. And even like the sort of top level layer of the supposed alternative media, like your Alex Joneses, your Russell Brands, your Andrew Tates, uh, all dickheads, all clear, like controlled opposition. Like Russell Brand claiming to be going through like a magical transition with Christ, yet his eyes still look like a serpent. It's it must be some transition he's went through.
I don't know. I'm sort of on the fence with him. I just don't understand what's going on there. But he's not someone that I pay too much attention to. I did a few years back. I used to watch his show on YouTube now and again, but I switched off a while back
What
now.
about Owen Benjamin?
Pardon?
What about Owen Benjamin? You know the comedian. No,
No, I don't know him.
he's quite an insightful guy. He sort of went off the rails a few years ago. He was in like that Rogan Sphere comedy circle. Um, had an edible on Joey Diaz's podcast and kind of lost his mind a wee bit and went to live in the woods. But his content now is fantastic,
No, I
absolutely
don't know
compelling.
him. I'll have to check
Yeah,
him out. Yeah,
yeah,
not
worth
someone
looking
on
up.
my radar.
Quite a few more questions about the books and stuff. So, in the old books, is there any like uh, inconsistencies with the layout of the landmass, which Tartaria was, or was it known as anything different, or is it like cohesive?
No, it's always considered the same area of land. If you look at the cartographers from the time, sort of what we would call the 1500s, the maps are all the same. They're showing Grand Tartaria, but some of them break it down into regions where you've got Chinese Tartary, for example. But it's either called Grand Tartaria, Grand Tartary, or it's broken down into, as I said, into regions. Um, so yeah, it's always the same landmass. We're talking Russia and Asia, but over a period of time, China drops off and the wall appears. Now, some people call it the Great Wall of China. I think
Well,
it's the Great Wall of
it's all facing
Tartaria.
in towards China. So, like
That's right.
from a military standpoint, it would clearly suggest that it was stopping the Chinese from getting into the opposing landmass. You know,
Yeah, that's right. I think they were overthrown. That the Tartarian rulers were overthrown, and that wall was put up there to keep them out. Because,
just
as you quite rightly said, it
directly
faces the wrong way.
Chinese concentration camps. I'm sorry, Xi Jinping. Obviously, it's definitely the Great Wall of China. I didn't mean what I just said. So, just to get that out of the way.
Yeah,
The way-
it's and getting into the wall as well. It seems to be easier on the other side, and everything's facing China. So yeah, it looks like it was put there to actually protect the what was left of Tartaria from the Chinese.
So, a guy who we have coming on here. Did you ever see the documentaries? A funny thing happened to the way on the moon.
No.
Parts. Port Sabrel. Absolutely amazing. He goes round and he finds all the original astronauts and asks them to swear on the Bible that they
Oh
went.
yes, sorry. Yeah. Did one of them
Yeah,
end up
yeah.
getting hit? Did Buzz Aldrin?
He got punched by Buzz Aldrin. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. So he's coming on sometime in December here, but it, I mean, even just the lengths that they went to lie, like he found extra video footage there, that they were just moving like a board across the window with a circle to make the Earth look like it was a ball. You know, this deception is real, but sometimes it's so lackadaisical in effort. You know, like
Yeah, and of course you got people like Stanley Kubrick involved, haven't you? Who was
he
asked to
admitted
help
on his
film,
deathbed.
pardon?
He admitted it. Stanley Kubrick admitted it in a lengthy interview that he done that. His daughters also done an interview about him filming the moon landings as well, and it was around the same time they were filming Space Odyssey or whatever. So it would have made perfect timing. But I
Mm.
mean, obviously the world's a narrative, and there has been literal book burnings that have went on throughout periods of history, and I wonder how much knowledge has been lost. You know, you've been lucky enough to get a hold of some of these old books, but I wonder how many are still out there. Not,
Yeah, I mean they're not easy to find, and some of them are really expensive. But that's why I would say to people that the best place to start is looking for old encyclopedias. And to be fair, I find things in old shops, old antique shops, second-hand shops. The books aren't that expensive in there. It's when you go to a bookstore that sells second-hand books that they really ramp the price up. And we've
yeah.
actually got an Oxfam shop here near us, and that has some fantastic books in. I've got an awful lot from there, but I've also bought some online. You can find them on eBay. So I would say that get any atlas you can get, or sorry, encyclopedia that contains atlases. Any of those you can find from 1800 or older, you're onto something, because the
Yeah.
information in those is brilliant, and then you'll see it change. But a lot of
And you
it's
really get
online.
like those tingles in your spine when you're looking at stuff like that because you know
Mm,
you're looking at something almost forbidden. It was tried to be
yeah,
hidden.
and I think that
But
there are private libraries out there. Some households had books that were never actually found, and sometimes perhaps it could be an elderly relative dies and someone does a house clearance, and these books are just considered old and worthless, and they end up in a second-hand store at the back of the room. And I wade through them all, and I found incredible numbers of encyclopedias, old bibles, all sorts of things that have information in them that I've been able to use.
even some of the old Bibles are very interesting because it shows us that we've had times to, or well, money's an extra month or an extra month taken off. It should be 13 months to 28 days.
Yeah. Was it Sol? Was Sol the month they removed? Each month was
Something like
28
that.
days, wasn't it?
Each month is 28 days. It worked out
Mm,
exactly the exact cycle of the moon.
mm.
And then that was more Jesuitical fuckery.
Yeah, and they claimed it was to do with Easter, wasn't it? They didn't want Easter to move around so much. But the funny thing about Easter is that they're very specific. We celebrate Jesus' birth on the 25th of December, even though a lot of scripture says that actually it was the 11th of September he was born.
Yeah,
But we're always, no matter what happens, we're always celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December. But when it comes to Good Friday and Easter Sunday, they just pick the nearest weekend.
yeah. I think regardless of religion, like that, what goes on in the world, a lot of it is clear mockery of the Bible and a clear mockery
Mm,
of Christ and a clear mockery of the observing of the law of Christ. So how are you supposed to ever uphold your holy day if you don't know the days of the weeks, the months of the year?
yeah,
So that's why people that have kept looking up and have kept their sort of calendar by the sky, which you can do accurately to the second. Uh, they're the ones who still know what time we're in. They're the ones who have the real wisdom, the ones who never stop looking up
yeah,
and
yeah. I think you're
and
right there. It's
and
everything,
just
isn't it? They've hijacked absolutely everything. From the day of the week, the month of the year itself. We don't know what's up and what's down anymore, and what's left and what's right. And
No.
they've got us sort of running around in circles. And I think that they also introduce different conspiracy theories to actually distract us as well, and send us down rabbit holes that we'll never get to the bottom of.
Of course, and not that they don't have meat. A perfect example of that would be gematria. Yes, it's very important. Yes, you can clearly see there's numbers tied to everything. But by God, you can end up like Jim Carrey out of 23 and writing it on wall. You know, it's such a rabbit hole
Mm,
type topic that,
mm.
you know, you can start seeing numbers everywhere. You know, you start connect, oh, 1 plus 3. Like the way people break it down now, that's a rabbit hole subject. You're never going to get any fruit off that. You're not going to come to any resolutions. You know. So what if idiots encoded the whole way through Donald Trump's life? Like, what does that change? We still know he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, or not even. He's a wolf in wolf's
Oh,
clothing. But
absolutely, I think you're right. I had a brilliant one today. Somebody sent me a message on Facebook saying that they've been looking into Princess Diana and David Bowie, and they've decided it's the same person. And I said, well, it's interesting because I know that you can't get your head around it, can you? I couldn't, and I said to them, well, okay, you know, everything's on the table for me. I would never rubbish someone's opinions, and that's why I find it, as I said earlier on, really surprising when someone that is following the love of Christ can
yeah,
be so vile and full of venom. Um, so yeah, no matter what someone throws at me, I'll either say thanks for sharing this with me or interesting, food for thought, whatever. But I won't condemn them because we just don't bloody know. But on this occasion, I said, well, first of all, I used to live round the corner from Princess Diana. She drank in the same pub as me. I'm from Northamptonshire, and my friend's missus was actually the manager of the pub she drank in, and she'd been going in there since from her late teens. And people in the town in Northampton where I lived there until 5 years ago. We knew her. We knew her and her brother. Her brother's an absolute tosser, by the way. And the irony with it was that not only that, but my son's best friend's dad went to art college with David Bowie when they were kids.
yeah.
So I
There's
said,
that
so, you know,
confirmed.
I'm pretty sure they're not the same person because, you know, Princess Diana I've seen, you know, when she was younger in the pub, Fox and Hounds it was called, near Althorpe. And David Bowie went to college with a friend of mine. So, no, on this occasion, I don't think that that's possible. But
The
she's
same
adamant.
conspiracy is out there with Adele and Sam Smith.
Right.
So
Oh, right. Okay. This
if
is a bit
you
like
put
Lady
Sam,
Gaga and.
yeah, so if you put Sam Smith's songs through an auto tuner and put it up slightly, it sounds identical to Adele in the same way the other way around, and they're never seen together. Blah blah blah. It's another one of these just like mental wank things to look at. It's just, you know, a bit of fuckery to amuse yourself with on a Saturday evening. I'm intrigued to get an update on Tanzania because there is zero online as I've been checking while we've been on here. So, if even for 10 or 15 minutes next week, would it be possible to get you back on just to get an
Yeah,
update?
sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. I'll email him and just see if he can let me know what the news is out there. But it is a radio blackout, as you can see. There's nothing.
Complete whitewash. Yeah. I've
But
looked,
I
I've checked
mean,
Radio, checked the New York Times, I've checked every mainstream outlet. There's nothing
mm,
of significance there at all.
but you think, you know, it'd be interesting to see what happens when I put a post up tomorrow because, you know, now and again, I put a post up every day that the idea being that I'm sharing information with people and I want them to see something they might not be aware of. And today it was actually to do with Adolf Hitler. And I put the link to my website because I didn't want to put too much information that I have on him on a social media platform because I don't want to get my account taken down.
Yeah.
And and it'd be interesting to see if that post stays up. Although there's not much on it, it's just saying that it's someone that I've been looking into for a very long time. I found some information out about his bloodline. And also what happened to him after the war, the you know, Operation Paperclip, for example. Um, and I ended it. It was just a short post with a link to my website, and I said that please be mindful of what you comment on here because I don't want anybody to be offended. I don't want anybody to put their views up there that could offend others or cause a problem with Facebook. First comment I had to remove. Second comment I had to remove. And people banging on and on about the Jewish and this, that, and the other, and Hitler was this, Hitler was that, and I said that I specifically put a comment up on my post saying, please be mindful of what you write. We don't want to offend anybody. And I'm just thinking, heaven forbid, if my mum, who's Jewish, saw a couple of these comments that had gone up, she'd be in absolute tears, and she
Yeah.
would instantly see it as my fault. It's your
Yeah.
post.
Well,
You know,
the events, you're a facilitator off, and that's. I think though, where you went wrong there was explicitly asking, because that's going to automatically red flag the trolls, isn't it?
yeah, I
There'll be
am
an
quite
automatic
careful.
reaction.
I don't have an issue with blocking and deleting people, even if it's
Yeah.
someone that I've been speaking to for a while. If they're going to put rude comments up, or they want to attack people, or they start arguing with people, I will just delete and block, and
If it's
that's
not
it for me.
helpful, go.
No,
You know
it's
what I mean?
not.
Like
You don't need to do it. It's like sometimes
repeatedly we're getting attacked anyway, so like we should be coming together, not fighting each
exactly,
other.
yeah. And all I'm doing is, I'm not talking about what happened during the war. I'm not talking about what my ancestors, it's not that long ago, really. I'm calling them ancestors because they are to me, they're two generations before me.
Yeah.
What they went through, in camps and so on. It was nothing to do with any of that. It was to do with actually his bloodline, and also Operation Paperclip. What happened to him afterwards? Did he have any children? Where are they? That kind of thing. And was he trying to collapse the Rothschilds' banking empire out there? How did he get to a position of power out of nowhere, where 5 minutes earlier he was apparently living on the streets as a failed artist? And it's more that I was asking, that someone from nowhere can become one of the most notorious people in the history of the world. How does that happen? And that's the question I was asking. But a few people have turned it into, let's attack the Jews. And I'm thinking, well, keep your thoughts
Well,
to
it's prime
yourself on that
season,
one. Yeah, and I
and it
just
shows a
think,
lot. Because behind every public-facing Jew is the Jesuit string puller behind them. So for those that are truly in the knowledge, knows that like if they're being pushed to the forefront and we're all shouting about them, that would be a good indicator that that's not the people we need to be looking at.
yeah, it's always the people that are behind, like you said. These are people, they're pawns on a chessboard, aren't they? They're protecting and shielding the real problem. And I think that that's also
Always.
the same with politicians. That it's that we know that actually their strings are pulled and they're merely puppets, and we can hate them. We can decide we're not going to vote for them this time, and we can go on their Facebook page or their Twitter account and tell them that we think they absolutely bloody useless and we despise them and they're tossers and so on. But actually, all they're doing is they're being paid an incredible amount of money to deliver somebody else's message.
Exactly. Exactly,
And we
and
need to
that's
get to the
all
roots
they
of the
are.
cause.
There's no representation, and that's why I was saying
Mm.
last night on the was doing a bit of a monologue about the migrant crisis. Where the migrants not an enemy. Their distraction is the enemy. They're here as like the pressure valve to keep you looking left and right and warring amongst each other, instead of looking at the people who have put the legislation in place for that to happen. The likes of the Open Communities Foundation from George Soros, who funds all
Mm.
these cross national. You know, they're supposed to stop in the first safe country for an example. So like that's making it illegal twice and entering the country. They're entering the country illegally, and they've broke the Geneva Convention because they went past the first safe country and not stopped there for refuge. So
Mm.
and it's being funded by multinational corporations, like I said, like George Soros and other boo names that were allowed
Yeah,
to know. You know,
my gut feel on that hasn't changed. When it started happening, I said that these are all military serving age. They're coming here for a reason. They're not coming over tattered and torn. They're not coming over with children, with old people and babies. It's all young men. These are going to be uniformed and trained. These are going to be on the streets. These are going to be the people that enforce digital ID, staying within your 15-minute city, and so on, because they've got no allegiance to us. It's not
Yeah.
like your local copper, who a lot of people have run out of respect for. And it's not going to be like the armed forces, who I would find it very unlikely would turn on their own. I
I
find that
think they're
very
here as maybe
unlikely.
like a backup, because I honestly think the control mechanisms are well enough in place. The the malleability of the hive mind is clearly shown through COVID to be well enough in place that they can use their normal problem reaction solution to bring this into place. And if not, then they do have them there. What they're using the migrants for currently is the gerrymandering of the political scene. You know, changing the political landscape of certain regions. They most likely will be used in some form against us, but I don't think they'll even need an army to enforce what's coming.
Have you
It'll be
seen the protests though that are taking place? I know that it's
oh, I
not
see, yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
very well publicized, but
But I believe fully that these are engineered. So this is an
do you?
engineered crisis. This uprising, like this patriotic uprising, I understand the statistics behind the annoyances, etc., etc. But this enemy has been put in place at a very specific time, and you know you have actors like Tommy Robinson, Stephen Laxley
Hmm.
leading the charge here, clear state actors. You know, like Grand Old Duke of York's. They never offer you redemption. They never offer you hope. Just more anger, just more visceralness, and a hatred towards a certain group of people. Once
Mm.
again, the migrants aren't the problem. They're just a like a symptom of the controlling mechanism. And you and I are falling into the exact same trap as the deadheads or whatever you want to call it. Like by even believing that we're being brought into civil war by no
Yeah,
chance other than control. You know, and we
you
think,
can see
oh,
it coming,
finally,
can't you?
yeah, finally people are sticking up for our kids. Well,
Mm.
were we sticking up for them whenever they were bringing in abortion laws? Were we sticking up for them
Mm.
whenever they were getting raped around the corner from your house by like it's not. It is an actual race thing. Let's be honest. It's about people being different to you, and then it's a
Yeah,
problem. It's because it's becoming
yeah,
homogenized. They don't look the same as you. Hold on, you're hitting our women. That's not okay. But yet you can sniff 3 bags of gear on a Saturday night, beat your missus, and like you can
yeah.
rationalize it in your head, and just knuckle draggers. And to be honest, I probably got a hiding in the area I live in for saying this because there's so many people involved in it, but they just don't have any depth of clarity or thought. And like they're looking for a Tommy Robinson to lead them, just some empty head that can put it all on one group of people. You know, there needs to be no introspection involved. You know, no look at your own life, no look at your own habits, no look at your own choices throughout the last 10 years that have led the country to this place. But let's blame it all on the migrants.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I
it's
totally agree
very
with
much
you.
engineered, and it's engineered to keep the fighting side of the population like focused on the migrants, because if you
Mm.
keep them angry, they're going to be angry about the social setting at the moment. So let them think it's the migrants' fault.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
the
I totally
government
agree.
operate in impunity and the digital IDs brought in under the guise of it, sure, like the Unite the Kingdom marches with Tommy Robinson, they were either facial recognition exercises or digital ID exercises.
Mm.
One of the two.
Yeah, I agree.
He's
Yeah,
too
I totally agree.
too connected money wise to the power systems.
Mm.
But this will definitely not get censored. It has been fantastic to have you back on again, Guy, and
Thank you.
I'll get you back on next week in regards to Tanzania because that definitely needs
Yeah,
to be
sure.
got out there. And what is the situation? How many of your wife's family still out there and stuff?
No, no, they
Oh,
came over to here. Some went to Canada, and the rest came to England. Yeah, so
oh,
we
thank
don't
God.
have anybody out there. No, but I'll try and get an update for you
Yeah.
between now
Okay.
and then I can then I can share it with your audience when we speak.
No worries, Guy. Pleasure as always, and have a
Thank
good
you.
week. And hope the other podcasts go well for you today.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for having
All
me
right.
back on.
Yeah. No
Take
worries.
care.
Thank you. Bye bye. And thank you very much for joining us today. And it's always great to have Guy back on. If you could like, share, and subscribe just to help the algorithm, that would be fantastic.
Only in the looking back at life are you able to discern that you were were being crafted through every little concern. Forging trials attacked because you had a role. This is why there's been a constant fight for your soul. The furthest into the world I've been, debauchery, iniquity was all I seen. The pleasure dome of dopamine is fleeting and devoid. While we call it mental health and addiction just to avoid. That is the consequence of sin, and their warnings to draw near to that place that is filled with uncertainty. But with him you lose all fear. Only in the looking back at life are you able to discern that you were being crafted through every little concern. Forging trials attack because you had a role. And this is why there has been a constant fight for your soul. We choose the easy path because the thought of actual sacrifice makes us accept the false doctrines presented because it fits nice. It doesn't challenge your behaviors or teach you what is right. It divides you with theology and confusion. So all we do is fight. Only in the looking back at life are you able to discern that you were being crafted through every little concern. Forged in trials attacked because you had a role. And this is why there has been a constant fight for your soul. But as we are in the age of information, makes ignorance a claim of retardation. There is a war that is not of the physical dimension. Just no faith minus works would lead to spiritual annihilation. Only in the looking back at life are you able to discern that you were being crafted through every little concern. Forged in trials attacked because you had a role. And this is why there has been a constant fight for your soul. Oh. Only in the looking back at life are you able to discern